Hello friends, this is TKD. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so. And today, as a part of Apache Spark 3 learning, we are going to see how to count up how many of each star ratings exist in the Movielens 100k dataset. This dataset has been posted into my YouTube channel description and also in my GitHub account. This code is also provided in the GitHub account, so feel free to download it and learn. Today we are going to look at the ratings counter program in detail, and we'll see how we can count the star ratings using Apache Spark 3. We will try to break this down and we'll find out what's going on in here. Open up your IntelliJ IDE with Scala plugin and you should see something like this. And again, if you want to run it, you can go to run configurations and just try to run it again, and this let Scala IDE does what it is supposed to do. Let's give it some more time. Assuming it's a big data set of 100k data set, it will take some time, and still compiling, still compiling. And here you can see the ratings database. Just to remind you what this script does, it goes to 100,000 movie ratings and counting up the different distribution rating scores. So you can see here we have 6,110 movie ratings counts with rating of 1, and around approximately 11,370 counts for the rating of 2, so on and so forth. Let's dive in and see how it actually worked. So as this is a lot of amount of code, just open up in your IntelliJ IDE and follow along with me. We will read one line of code at a time. So let's count up this code wherein the Spark program counts the movie ratings based on their ratings value and get understand at the deeper level, shall we? So let's take a look at the first few lines of code here. First thing we can do is we can define in what package this code lives under. It's a unique way of providing a namespace to our code so that it doesn't collide with the other people libraries. Next, we import the specific libraries for this script. We are going to import all the Spark libraries which we are going to need, specifically the Apache Spark Context library. And also we are going to import the log4j package because we are going to get some gains using the log level error. We are not going into depth about log4j, but we are going to print only the log error level messages. But the first bit of Spark code we are going to run is this. So remember, the Spark context object is what we use to create our RDDs. So this is another first thing we gonna make. So this is saying that we are going to create a new Spark context object. We are going to say SC, which is an immutable Spark context. And this local star, which is in the code, is all it says is that we are going to run this in our local machine. not going to be on the cluster at all, but the star indicates that we can use all the CPUs, say all the cores of the CPU, to actually distribute that locally. So if you have a multi-core CPU running, so you can still distribute it across all the cores. And ratings counter is just a name for the Spark context. That's just for if you're looking for the name in the Spark UI or progress on the job, we will know what to look it up under. So that will label this context in the UI. This job runs too quickly for us to view that, but later in the course, we will have an example of doing that. So let's look at an example of doing that. So what's going on? So the first thing we do, we take that Spark context we created and we call a text file on it with a path to where the Movielens 100k datasets live. So the u.data file actually contains the ratings data and it's going to import that one line at a time into a new RDD called lines. So lines is a data set where every row contains one row of input data that's in u.data. So what that u.data looks like, that's the in your screen. If you see here, however, if you see your screen on the top, so that's the input data looks like. So the format here is basically the user ID, movie ID, rating, and timestamp. So the way to interpret each line here is, for example, user ID 196, watched movie ID 242, rated a 3 stars at this time, and so on and so forth. So we are importing the raw data we are starting in here, and it lives in an RDD, which is called lines at this point. Now the next thing we wanted to do, and it is generally a good practice to throw where the information we don't need. A lot of the time and resources that a Spark job requires, it depends on how much data it has to push around. So the sooner you get rid of data that you don't need, the better. And that is what exactly we are doing here. Basically, we are calling the map on that lines RDD to transform into a new RDD called ratings. Now this new RDD ratings actually parses out lines of RDD and only extracts the field which we care about. The third field, which is actually the rating and the value itself. Remember, our end result is just the breakdown of how many times each rating occurs. So we don't really care about users or about the movies or the timestamps. All we care about is those rating values. So let's take a look on what's going on here. We are calling the map function to transform. Basically, that map function will transform the lines input RDD and passing at this function and passing it this to function to pass it with. So basically it takes each individual line, call it X, convert it to a string, split it up to a list on tab characters because it happened to know that this file is tabbed delimited, and then extract field number 2 from that list. Remember, we start counting at 0. The field 0 will be the user ID, 1 is the movie ID, and 2 is the movie rating is the one we care about. So basically this function gets applied to every line of code, that is line of the input file, and we get the ratings RDD, which contains something like this 33121, where only the rating survives. Now we have a ratings RDD which have each row which is the actual rating value for each individual ratings. In this example, we start with this, just a list of 33121 because those are the actual rating star values is for each row of input data. Are you with me so far? Don't be afraid to pause and go back and watch the entire video, whatever I said till now, because this is all are very important to understand. So be mindful. So these are the real fundamentals of Spark programming here. So now what? Well, the end result we want is the count of each rating and how many times it occurs. So Spark has this handy function called count by value that will do this specific function for you. Now remember, count by value is the action by which Spark will go and call the computed directed acyclic graph and to start chunking away all of the data. So the count by value takes an RDD and returns back a scalar map object where basically it maps identifiers and values to how many times it occurred. And in this example, we are starting off with an RDD that contains just the values of the ratings themselves. Count by value will give us a scalar map of, and we can do whatever we want to, where it maps the values to how many times it occurs. So basically we have at this point an RDD that we perform an action count by value on and returns a scalar data and just a map format. For example, rating 3 occurred twice and rating 1 occurred 2 times and rating 2 occurred 1 time. Makes sense? So we have 2 3s, 2 1s and 1 2. Now the last thing we have to do is just display our results in a good way. So the way we are going to do that is to convert our result map app to a sequence, something which we can actually sort, and we are going to sort that by with the first field. This is just saying take my results and map and convert it to a sequence by the actual rating value. And then we can take that result in a sequence call the print line for each row. So that's which prints out the each individual row to the results in a sorted order, and our final results are rating 1 occurred twice, rating 2 occurred once, and rating 3 occurs twice in this very simplified example. Makes sense. It's not really that very complicated, but it illustrates how simple it can be to perform big distributed operations with just a few lines of code in Spark. So that's pretty cool stuff with Spark. It's just that easy, isn't it? So if you need to watch this video again, please do that. If you want to have a stare at the code, please do. I have provided my GitHub URL and also the input data of the Movielens 100k data. I highly encourage you to do that and play around with this Spark code. And let's talk about more what's going on underneath that hood. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel to get the latest updates. This is TKD, so just subscribe to TKD Health Tips. Thank you. Stay safe. Bye.